Hi, this is Natalie Fleming. This is a very difficult subject. It's about a step-parent parental alienation, when the step-parents will not allow children or even adult children associate with their spouse anymore. And I've talked to many people who have had this problem, and I've talked to, it was a mission president's wife, and she expressed the difficulty her husband had in his life as an adult. This man's a mission president, and he is still troubled because he doesn't have access to his father because of his stepmother wouldn't. And this is a recurring problem, and I run into people all the time who have this problem. And in this, we seem to have a conflict between the importance of the marital vows and taking care of that, and in conflict with adult children. And obviously, as stake president, obviously he's not a troubled child. So this is a huge issue for so many people, since so many people just getting married over and over again. So I've seen this multiple times. And one situation, there's a phrase I'd like you to learn. And this is, I will always love all of my children, and all of my children will always be welcome in my home. It's an important phrase, okay? I will always love all of my children, and all of my children will always be welcome in my home. So how do we balance out the marital covenant when there's a conflict between your spouse and your children from another marriage? Well, let's stop and think about a couple things. Number one, in the LDS faith, if you are given the fullness of the gospel of how to live a good life and treat people well and return to God, you are required to pass that on to your kids and to teach them. And there are parental responsibilities that you have to have. And there is a term in LDS faith, and that is that the sins of the children are on the heads of the parents when the parents fail them. If the parent doesn't do their part to try to teach them what is right, then the sins of their children and their children's children and their children's children, and on and on. So if you have the gospel and you do not teach it to your kids on your own, now whether they have the choice to receive it or not, but if you're not doing your part by being there, and that's where you get into custody orders. Some people don't realize that a custody order, when they've made a custody agreement to see a kid, that they've made an agreement to see the kids, and that they think about what they get. They don't think about that it is a commitment, that time commitment. It's not just a financial commitment, but some states will actually prosecute if they don't fulfill their time commitment, if it's egregious enough that if they refuse their time commitment. So how do we do this when we're people of faith and we value our marriage and we're trying, and yet we have this conflict and we're put in this situation? And the answer is in a couple places. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 12 through 15, they talk about a member being married to a non-member. And I'll bring this into context in a minute. And it says, if any brother have a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. Meaning, if you're married to a non-member and they want to stay married, stay married. And if the woman with half a husband that believeth not, and he be pleased with her to dwell with him, let her not leave. So don't push him out. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. So if a member is married to a non-member, and the non-member doesn't like the fact that you're living the gospel, and they want to leave, you continue to live the gospel, you continue to love them, but if they choose to leave because you're living the gospel, then you let them leave. Now, obviously, our covenant to take care of and provide both, and to be there and to teach and to love our children is before God. And we will be held accountable for that. And personally, I believe that just from the things my children have said and the experiences I had before they were born, I am 100% convinced that they were my guardian angels, and someone else's guardian angels too, from things that I recall. So, hey, they got me through my youth and through someone else's youth. They were patient with us. We can be patient with them. So what do we do with a conflict? Then how does this apply? Well, if your spouse, if you're a member of whatever faith, and in my case, the LDS faith, and my spouse was going to a bar, I would be frustrated and upset. But if they asked me to go, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go. And if they said, well, if you don't do this, what's the point of this marriage? I still wouldn't go. I'm going to live the gospel. And I would continue to live the gospel. And if they wanted to leave because that's not the kind of lifestyle I want, I would let them leave. And so a friend of mine had this problem with her husband where he was hostile towards her adult and young children. And she prayed about it, and the answer she got is that she should stay faithful to her husband. And that really confused her. And what should she do? But the hostility was escalating. And there's a phrase that is repeated almost word for word in many homes, and it is, when this child leaves, I want it to be agreed that when this child leaves, they are not allowed in our home ever again. And that's what the step-parent will say. And it is said almost word for word over and over again in so many situations. And so the response is, should be, I will always love all of my children, and they will always be welcome in my home. And so you have to stand your ground, and you have to continue to love your kids because you're accountable. And if they want to leave, well, they should have known. They married you. They knew your kids were crazy. I think they should. But you have to. You're under covenant to continue to love them. Now, what if your child's troubled and has problems? Well, we all know what to do when somebody who is under our stewardship and under our care is troubled and have problems. Well, that's in many places. Matthew 18, verse 12. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them gone astray, doth he not leave the 99, and goeth to the mountains, and seek that which is gone astray? And if it so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. So I love it that verse, it's been a long time since I read it. I forgot it refers to the mountains. And he goes into the mountains, which means they faced great adversity. He went to the mountains to save the sheep. And that is easily translated into, facing some pretty hard things to go and save that lost child. And we are under those obligations, and we are followers of Christ. So the answer to the question is, how do you reconcile these things? What is worse is if you're LDS and you believe that you shouldn't go to bars, and your spouse says you have to go to a bar, obviously you're not going to do that. What's worse, going to a bar or cutting off your child and not being with them? What's worse, robbing a bank? I think robbing a bank isn't as bad as this. I think cutting off your child is far worse than all those things. And because we are under obligation to love them and to serve them. And the consequences are severe, and every child needs to know that they're loved and that love is unconditional, and that no one will get between their relationship with them and their parent. And so my advice is to continue to love your spouse and to reaffirm your love of all of your children and to let them know they're welcome in my home. And it is, no one can make up. No one else can make up to that child their lost love they have for that parent. When the child feels alienated from that parent, no one else can fill that gap. So it's very important. Both the mother and the father have an important role to play, and I've always felt that. And that's why I made a lot of the crazy decisions that I made, is to keep both the mother and the father in the home. And, well, yeah. And anyway, so that's my wisdom. And take it or leave it, toss it in the trash, whatever. Anyway, thank you.